Time to visit with Ben Badler from Baseball America, and I've known and talked to Ben for many years about international signings. And what's exciting, I think, Ben, for Oriole fans is the Baltimore's back in the market. Obviously, Mike Elias came over. He later hired Kobe Perez. That's an excellent 1-2 punch of guys who have some international amateur connections around the world. And we saw it with a signing class of 34 for the last period, and the next period's about to begin, and we'll touch on that a little bit. But you wrote a great article yesterday about some agreements the Orioles have, and we'll get into that. But Ben, overall, what will it mean to the Orioles, do you think, what they're doing now with Elias and Kobe Perez?
It's an enormous shift from what they were doing previously. I mean, before you had really 29 teams that were being competitive for signing the top international prospects every year, including the Marlins and including, I mean, the Rays. The Rays are, not spending a whole lot of money elsewhere. Certainly not in the major league club, but they have one of the best international programs in baseball. They have our number one overall prospect in baseball, Wander Franco, 3 in our top 100. It's a big part of why they have one of the best farm systems in baseball. But for so many years, the Orioles were just not active at all. And you can really see the lack of talent coming in from Latin America in their farm system. But like you mentioned, since Mike Elias came in and hired Kobe Perez and got that commitment from ownership to actually go and spend on international players, you started to see a little bit of an uptick in 2019 in terms of the signing class they brought in. Obviously, getting a kind of a late start puts them at a disadvantage there, but got some pretty interesting arms. But yeah, 2020, I think is going to be, again, not the bar was set all that high for them previously, but I think it's going to be the biggest international signing period for them yet in terms of the players that they're going to be able to add to the organization.
Let's get right into some of these guys you mentioned in the article. And I'm not sure on pronunciations. If I botch one, help me out. If you are, which I'm sure some of these are pretty tricky, but some of the guys maybe not. The catcher you mentioned, and again, this was in the article published Monday on Baseball America. And Ben, you're going to go around all Major League Baseball, give a kind of a preview of every team. So it started with the AL East, and we Orioles were published yesterday. A catcher, Samuel Asalo, top catching prospect in the Dominican, 6'3", not even 16 yet, will be in August. And as you mentioned, Ben, projected bonus you have of $1 million to $1.5 million. That's for the Orioles. That's a big fish, considering, again, there's a lot of these agreements happened years before even Elias got there. Tell me a little bit about this guy.
Yeah, Basayo, like you said, 6'3" at 15 years old. That's a big kid. But for somebody who's that big, usually you see, or a lot of times you see bigger guys who have longer swings. He doesn't really have that. It's a pretty short swing for a bigger guy from the left side. And what really stands out is the power with him, especially 2 power tools, just the raw power that he has and the strong arm behind the plate. And already at 15 years old, certainly I think once he gets even bigger and stronger, I think even both of those tools have a chance to tick up even more. So you've got a chance for a power hitting catcher. Again, like you said, 6'3" at 15 years old, just given how big he is at such a young age, you kind of hope he stops growing, right? Like you don't want him to end up being, these kids still grow taller. You don't want him to be like 6'5", potentially. So you hope he doesn't get too big and kind of retain his mobility and agility to be able to stay behind the plate. But if he does that, I think Basayo's got a chance to develop into a power hitting catcher down the road.
Another player you mentioned is a corner outfielder, Wilmer Feliciano, that you stated has some big raw power. And you also mentioned you anticipate a bonus of around or just under maybe $500,000. And I would add that last year when the Orioles signed those 34 players last period, spending approximately $5 million, the largest bonus was $475,000 to outfielder Luis Gonzalez. So these 2 projected bonuses by you would both exceed that. And I think I'm right here in saying would be the biggest bonus we've seen, for an international amateur, certainly under these new rules. So, Ben, what about Feliciano?
Yeah, Feliciano, big left-handed raw power is at a showcase that Major League Baseball ran in, I believe it was November, in Arizona at I forget which spring training facility it was, one of the major league parks, and he was hitting balls out of there, and at 16 years old. So don't see that too often. But yeah, big raw power from the left side. There is more swing and miss to his game. He's going to have to find a way to make some adjustments to tap into it with some more frequent contact against live pitching. He is a corner outfielder, so he's going to have to hit a lot. But you don't really have to project on the power with him because the power is already there right now. So yeah, it's like you said, if that level of a bonus, if that does come true, would have been probably their biggest bonus last year. But for the Orioles, it's kind of in that next tier above the top guys that they're looking at for 2020, and Basayo and Michael Hernandez, the shortstop out of Venezuela.
Talk with Ben Badler. Baseball America does such a great job covering international signings throughout baseball. And Ben, it was exciting to see the video you posted in your article on the Venezuelan shortstop, Miguel Hernandez, 6'4", 175 at 16. I guarantee you scouts and Oriole officials are dreaming on maybe him even filling out more and being in the mold of the modern shortstop who can catch the ball, hit with power, big, strong. I mean, he looks like he's in that mold.
Yeah, it's like you said, 6'4", 175. I mean, there's so many different ways a player like that can go in terms of, is he going to stay lean and athletic like he is right now, and be that 6'4", maybe 200-pound shortstop, or does he end up ballooning to 6'4", 230, right? Like and maybe end up moving off the position, but for right now, he's tall, he's lean, he's athletic. You usually don't see guys with that size, with that combination of power and speed. I mean, he's got a chance to be a power speed threat. He's a plus runner underway now, and he generates power relatively easily too. So a lot of bat speed and still a lot more projection. Like you were saying, it's a lot of space on that frame to fill out. So it sort of depends on how the body goes, and there's so many different ways it can go for somebody that size at 16 years old. But certainly think he's got a chance to develop even more power than he's got right now once he packs some more strength onto his frame. But yeah, definitely a pretty exciting power speed threat, or at least has the potential to be that down the road.
Ben, the bonus pools have been frozen, correct? Which would mean the Orioles in the upcoming period would have approximately 6.481 million as they had in the last one.
Yeah, I believe so. There's a few different groups. I don't remember the Orioles, which one they were in off the top of my head, but yeah, usually the pools increase a little bit based on revenue from the previous year, but just due to the global emergency right now, yeah, the pools I believe are reverting to what they were last year.
You and I both can remember, and it wasn't that long ago, when a team like the Yankees, for instance, or Dodgers, could spend 50 million if they wanted on international. There was no limit. This new system, in essence, a hard cap, has it had the desired effect, which to me would seem to even the playing field uh, around baseball? Are you seeing that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't see any team right now that really has an advantage as far as, we can just go out and spend more money than anybody else, because like you said, it's basically a hard cap system. Everybody has roughly equal money. It's not a system where you can either A, just spend whatever you want, which is what it used to be, or B, the previous system, which was, you would go over your bonus pool, and then you'd have to pay a tax basically equal to what you spent almost, and then for 2 years you couldn't sign anybody for $300,000 or for more than $300,000. So you had every year you had a half dozen or so teams like that, or more, I should say, actually, that couldn't spend more than that, and then you'd have about a half dozen teams that were just blowing past their bonus pool, and you had the Yankees, Cubs, and Dodgers did that, but the Rays did it, the Padres did it in a huge way one year. So yeah, right now it's basically everybody's on a roughly equal playing field in terms of what they can spend. So um, a lot of it does come down to, certainly there's a lot of luck involved too in projecting players who are that young, but it just comes down to teams going out and being able to make good evaluations on these players. It's really not so much about which owner is willing to make the biggest investment in terms of the signing bonuses.
So Kobe Perez has projected the next period, not the one that would start this July 2nd, um, as the one when maybe the Orioles can really start to get in with the bigger fish, so to speak. Does that sound reasonable because of how far in advance these things move?
Yeah, so I mean, it's the signing period every year starts on July 2nd, but when you see all the players signing with their photos and their families on July 2nd, it's not like those deals came together on July 1st. It used to be, it would maybe happen a few months in advance, and then it started getting earlier and earlier, and now you have players who are making commitments to clubs a year, 2 years in advance. So when Mike Elias and Kobe Perez came in and like the end of 2018, early 2019, they were kind of behind the curve already in terms of what they could do for 2019 and even for 2020 to some extent. I mean, it sounds like they're going to end up signing some pretty good players anyway for 2020, but yeah, I think 2021 would probably be the first year where they could come in and really scout and try to go after anybody in the class. So yeah, I mean, I think 2020 will be, you're going to start seeing those $1 million bonuses from the Orioles. But yeah, I think 2021 is kind of that first almost blank slate kind of year for them to come in and attack it however they really want to.
Are you finding, Ben, that how they use the pool varies greatly by teams? In other words, you hear people say, well, if you only have 6.4 million, you might be better off signing $2 million guys and a few smaller and hope you hit big with those two. And other people say, well, why don't you sign 60 guys for 100,000 and hope you get 5 out of that? I mean, I guess there's varying philosophies at work.
Yeah, and I think the team, even an individual team's philosophy can vary from 1 year to the next two. I mean, we saw the Giants signed our top ranked 16-year-old international prospect in 2018, Marco Luciano, who's now already one of our top 20 prospects in baseball, coming off a season where he was just 17 years old in rookie ball. Whereas this year they're going to spread their money around a lot more, and they've had a lot of success, I think, the last few years with players. So yeah, I think you see a lot of different strategies that just sort of either depends on a team or just depends on the year. I mean, I think for me, if you just look at, and it's easy for me to say, oh, just go out and like sign the number one player, like it's everybody. I think a lot of teams are after those guys, or the guys that they consider the number one player. But you look at guys like Wander Franco was our number one player in 2017. Is the number one prospect in baseball right now with the Rays. Number one in 2015 was Vladimir Guerrero Jr. Our top three in 2013 were Eloy Jimenez, Gleyber Torres, and Rafael Devers. So, certainly, you can look at, when you're projecting 16-year-old kids, there's a lot of risk, and a lot of them are not going to work out. But, the days where I think there was and there's, the reputation was sort of deserved too, where teams were spending a lot of money on players and, they just weren't coming through. Whereas now I think the system of, training these players is very different than it was 10 years ago. They're playing a lot more games than they ever were. The way the players are being evaluated now by clubs is there's a lot more history, a lot greater sample size, a lot more information on these players than ever. And you're starting to see those results come through on teams making big investments on really the top premium players. But at the same time, we're still seeing, whether it's a Ronald Acuna or Victor Robles or, guys at that $100,000, $250,000 level come through. And I think especially with pitching, that's true too, where, we look at the draft, the track record of first round picks who are high school right-handed pitchers is pretty ugly to be frank, and it's obviously even more challenging with 16-year-old pitching. So I think a lot of teams shy away from, and rightfully so, paying big bonuses to pitching prospects who are 16 years old. But you can definitely find a lot of good value there, and I think that's something the Orioles were actually able to do pretty well in their 2019 class.
Last thing for you, Ben. Over the years, we hear about international draft. Do you think it's even possible? Is it something that's going to be discussed in that CBA for 2021? Will we see it?
I do think it's coming in the next CBA. They were talking about it, and I think the owners really thought they were going to get it in the previous CBA. They were going to have this midterm bargaining even, which is really unusual. Before all of this hit and previously, but that didn't end up working out. But I do think that, look, the owners still want an international draft, and I don't see the MLBPA standing in the way of that. They did last time. There was a lot of protests and MLBPA members who were speaking up, saying they were against the international draft. But um, you know, ultimately they gave into a going from this uncapped system to a hard cap system. So I don't see the Players Association really putting up. They might. I'm sure they will posture to some extent and say, "Oh no, we won't do that," and then maybe they get, I don't know, a few extra inches of leg room on the bus or something, or some other concession that they're going to say, "Okay, yeah, we'll give the owners that in exchange for a draft." So whether that comes in 2022 right away, or in 2023, maybe there's a buffer year. I'm not sure, but I do think an international draft is going to be here in the next CBA.
Very interesting. Always enjoy reading your stuff in Baseball America. Ben, thanks so much for taking time today.
Oh, thanks so much for having me on, Steve. I always enjoy talking to you.
Good stuff, my friend.
All right, good.
Let's see.